some on-demand video trainings coming. It's amazing. It's awesome that some of our own students. Trip is involved with this. Guys, this is ongoing training. There is process here to be able to sign up for these, and can't say enough about the opportunity. I've got something. What the heck is going on here? I've got something where all of a sudden on my screen, it's putting in subtitles. Are you guys seeing this? There was a little thing that came on with Zoom here. It popped up and there was no X to get out of it. So I finally said, okay. And now it's giving me a test drive on something, but I'm serious. Are you guys seeing this like CC closed captioning? Oh my gosh, I don't know how to turn this thing off. I don't know how I turned it on. If I right click, I'm going to try something, and I hope subtitle setting. This is hilarious. Stop subtitles. There we go. Oh my gosh, that was freaky. That was freaky. All right, here we go. So let's talk about let's talk about what I want to talk about today. The title of the class is called "Take a Breath" or "Stop and Take a Breath." I want to give you a quick little bit background, because this is something that goes to the heart of what we call trading mindset, or the trading challenges that happen inside of the brain that are unique to trading. And there literally are some things that are unique to trading that happen from a psychological standpoint, that's happening neurologically, that we need to understand, because you won't get a good handle on it if you don't. Quick, disease. What is disease? It's an interesting word when you break it apart. It's ease is what we think ease is. It's comfortable. So dis-ease is not at ease. Okay, something is out of order, something is wrong if it's in dis-ease. Inflation. Inflammation. I've heard it said that inflammation is the cause of all disease. I don't think that that's totally accurate, but inflammation is at the root of all dis-ease. When something is wrong, physiologically, there is inflammation, because inflammation is a response. It's a response of your immune system to something that's wrong. That's why inflammation is always present when there's dis-ease. And so medical attempts will be made to try to reduce inflammation. Okay, that's nice. But what you're trying to do is you're fighting something that is natural, that is trying to fix something. It's trying to do something for you that's helpful. But it's something that has to be monitored, because it can get out of control. When it gets out of control, then we have real problems. So your immune system is trying to help you, but if it gets out of control, then the inflammation, which is designed to help you, can cause a lot of damage. All right. So inflammation is something that is connected to trading. I'll explain that as we go here, but I just want you to have the background. Your immune system, those are your first responders. They go into a very aggressive defense when something's wrong. If the sensors in your body detect an invader, a virus, a bacteria, something that's not supposed to be there, the brain sends out the stormtroopers, and they head this off at the pass, and to stop things that are wrong or bad, and to fix them. And you've got a whole mechanism, white blood cells, corpuscles go in to do the damage control, to isolate, to kill. But a lot of times there is swelling that will take place. Things will become very tender and hard to deal with, because if you touch it, it hurts. It's your body actually trying to help you. And so going after the symptoms and trying to reduce the inflammation, that gives you some relief for sure. But there's an underlying process that it's responding to. So why? Well, it's because it's self-preservation. It's a serious response to anything that might potentially harm you. That's the way your system is built, guys. It's called the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And it's all connected in trying to preserve and to help you. So the continued inflammation beyond what it's supposed to do, which can happen, exaggerates and exacerbates the problems that the disease was causing in the first place. So the three of the biggest killers in the United States for people here is heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's. There's a few more, but those could be considered maybe the top three. All of those have a serious inflammation problem connected with them. And like I said, it's a cause and effect kind of a thing, because it's supposed to be there, and yet sometimes it can do more damage than it was intended to, the good that it was intended. So let's talk about how it works in your head. Anxiety, when you feel anxious, when you feel anxiety, it triggers protective reactions. Okay. Barry, I agree. Tripp says, definitely the body's mark that something is out of order. Exactly. Anxiety, when you feel anxious, you trigger the protective responses of your parasympathetic nervous system. And you have feelings of fear, some level of fear. Anxiety is an expression of fear. There's something that is making you feel uneasy, dis-ease. You're not at ease. And it's not a physical dis-ease that's coming from a virus or an invader from the outside. It's a thought process that's causing dis-ease. Okay? It triggers a protective reaction. In fact, fear itself is protective. Your body, you guys all know this, that you are only born with two natural fears. And I've looked this up, but I have good reason to believe this. I've seen a lot of evidence to back it up. You are only born with two fears. One is loud noise, and the other one is falling. Every other fear you learn in your life is just that. It's learned. It's a learned process. It's not natural. Fear of falling is damaging. You get hurt if you fall. It's an instinctive, it's built into the hardwiring. And loud noise is something that startles you. Other than that, every other fear is learned. As you go through life, you learn these things through experience, and you start to develop this repertoire in your brain, this memory bank. And this memory bank then triggers anything that might relate to something that you've already experienced that was damaging or it was negative. And so you're very careful. Anything like that even looks like it or smells like it, it's going to trigger this response. And it starts with anxiety a lot of times, progresses to fear. It can be immobilizing, okay? But it's a core level self-preservation response. 85%, now this is fascinating, 85% of what we worry about never happens. This was a Cornell study. It was very exhaustive. I read through the briefs on it. Fascinating study. So our fear response is built up from past experiences, and anything that even looks like it will cause us to anticipate and start going, oh, wait, no. I already know where this is going. You see, that's how it works. I already know or I'm worried about where this is going. So we start worrying about things. Well, 85% of the time, it never happens. That means our system is hypersensitive to protect us. 13% of what does happen turns out to be easier than we thought, and something good comes out of it. That means 3%, guys, this is fascinating. 3% of what we worry about actually happens the way we're worrying that it was going to happen. Isn't that something? Only 3% of what you actually worry about happens the way you thought it was going to happen in that negative context. 85%, it never even happens. 79% of what does happen, or 13% of the total, turns out to be less than what you thought. It wasn't that bad, and you actually got something good out of it. Guys, we make our experiences, especially the ones we anticipate, far more miserable than they need to be because of the anticipation. The anticipation is worse. That's another anecdote. The anticipation is worse than the actual event. Now, let's get real here. How many of you are willing, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but how many of you are willing to put your hand up or say something in the text chat that relate to this right here? Someone is in a trade, it's going against them, and they're freaking out. They're going through, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose $5,000. I'm going to lose $10,000 on this trade. And you are in agony watching it right up until the market closes on that day of expiration on those options. And as soon as the bell rings and the market closes, the person has this sensation of, it's a relief. The 10,000 that they were worried about just happened. They just lost the 10,000, and yet they have a sense of a relief. Brenda says on a daily basis. And Tripp says, yeah, it is. It's a relief. Why? Because the anticipation was worse than the actual event. We were putting ourselves through hell worrying about this consequence, and we couldn't do anything about it except make it a horrific experience. And when it actually happened, you get this big sense of relief. Guys, the tight chest, the muscle aches, the sweating, the shortness of breath, just the pit in the stomach, all over something that turns out to be a relief when it's done. Guys, it can be absolutely immobilizing. It can be debilitating, and we bring it on ourselves. There's a way to deal with this, and that's the hope. That's the whole message today, is how do we deal with this anxiety that can impact negatively our trading and our life experience? And for crying out loud, when it fills our system with cortisol as we're worrying about something, it's damaging. It's actually shortening our life. It's very damaging. So in trading, we are trading in an environment that's a 50-50 contest. I do this all the time. I say, what are your odds that the trade is going to go in your favor? And you have to say 50-50, because if it hasn't happened, and it could go either way, unless you have inside information and you've cheated, you already know what the outcome is, then it's a 50-50 deal, okay? But we try to contest this thing. We try to make it a contest. We try to win. We try to beat the competition. And I say I hope that's not true, because I know I preach this. I know Rob preaches this. Guys, it's not about beating anything. And when you hear people talk about, I got a system that'll beat the market, bull crap. Sorry, baloney. Guys, you're not beating it. You can't beat the market unless you've got some way to cheat. You have no control of what's happening on the field. I say you're in the bleachers. You're not in the field. You can't get down there and influence the direction of a stock so that your option will work the way you want it to work. You just can't. Okay? This plays games with our minds when we make it a competition, when we think it's about winning and losing. It's not. It's not. It triggers our core anxiety because intuitively we know that we have no control. So your subconscious knows that you just entered into a situation and you just put real money into a trade that you have no control of the outcome. Okay? Brenda wants me to go backwards on this one. Take a screenshot. Brenda wanted a screenshot of this one, or do you want the first one that talked about dis-ease? I'll give you long enough to get this one. Brenda, give me a green light. You should have a screenshot, or tell me what you want here. Okay. The first one right there, that one. Take a screenshot real quick, and we got to jump, get going here. Come on, Brenda, let me know. You got it? Say yes quickly. Brenda. Brenda. All right, I'm going to move on. Sorry. Hope you got it. All right. Conventional wisdom, guys, to deal with this is you have to trade with no emotion. Again, I'm going to call bullpucky on this one. We don't trade without emotion. It's not possible. You're not a robot. All right? They say don't trade with any emotion. You can't trade with emotion. Emotion is bad. You know, greed and fear, they drive the market. Those are bad things. Okay? I say baloney. Baloney. Scott says, I'd rather trade calmly. Exactly. Calm is an emotion, isn't it? Confident is an emotion. We're emotional beings. We are not robots. And you do want to trade with emotion. You want to trade with the right emotions. It's a matter of which emotion, not no emotion. All negative trading emotions equal fear. So I'm going to challenge this greed versus fear thing, guys, because I've said this for a long, long time. If there is one negative emotion in the market, it is fear. It is not greed. It's not. And the reason it's not greed is because greed is a manifestation of fear. It's like saying there are two there's two different fruits on this tree. There's an apple, and there's a red apple, and there's a green apple. No, that's not different fruit. They're both apples. Okay. There's a red one and there's a green one, but don't tell me there's two different kinds of fruit. There's not. Guys, greed is fear. Greed is a manifestation of fear. In my mind, there is only one negative emotion in the market, and it is fear. When you have fear of the unknown, that's fear of getting hurt, fear of getting hurt again. Okay. You remember our system overreacts, it overprotects. 85% never happens. 97% either didn't happen, or if it did, it was less of a problem than you thought, and you actually learned something from it. Guys, if you have a trade goes against you, it should be in that 13%. Yeah, it cost me a little bit of money, but I learned something from it. Okay, it wasn't that bad. Fear of being out of control. That's the fear of falling. That's been with you since you were born. That sense of being out of control triggers the exact same response of when you trip, when you slip, when you lose your balance. That same fear, that fear response is the same thing you get when you are anxious. When you have anxiety, that you're afraid of something. Your system is hyper reacting to something that hasn't happened yet. Guys, okay, a strange but related explanation. If you jump off of a 10-story building, as you're falling past the 8th floor, you could go, oh, wait, this is not so bad, right? You go past the 4th floor, you go, hey, I'm still alive. I'm feeling fine. The kind of wind is blowing, but other than that, nothing hurts. You go past the 9th floor, you're going, this is amazing. I've fallen 9 floors and it still didn't hurt, right? Now, eventually it's going to get to you, right? But the point is that the fear is, and the anxiety is experiencing something that hasn't happened yet. Okay. And from a trading standpoint, you want to be sure you don't go off a 10-story building, because it's just a matter of when, not if. If you do a trade setup right, you can outline the protective part of it. You could design in there an airbag just in case you, on the way down, you actually do wind up landing on something, and you want it to be a soft landing, not a hard landing. And that way you can jump off the 10-story building and go, yeah, I hope this works out. I hope somebody catches me part way down, but if they don't, I already know what I'm going to hit. And it's going to hurt a little bit, but it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to kill me. When you land on that airbag from 10 stories, guys, you're going to feel it, right? But you're not going to die, right? So you can change the whole anxiety level and the experience level by doing proper planning, by trading properly. It's a combination of mindset and planning so that you can control this anxiety response, this fear response. Your immune system is triggered. It goes into protection mode. It throws protection mode emotions, and tightness of chest, shortness of breath. All those things are responses that are built in to that fear mode that are triggered when you become anxious. And does it affect your trading? All right. The fight or flight mechanism, guys, which is built into you and honed very carefully over time. The two systems that are built into you is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now, the way you keep them apart, the way you understand them, sympathetic nervous system sympathizes with your fear. So it's going to support it. It's going to cause you to go into protection mode. You're going to buckle down or you're going to run away. You're going to dig in and get ready for a fight. And when it gets to the market, chances are you're going to lose because you don't have any control of the outcome. So if it goes your direction against you, it's going to happen. Nothing you can do about it. Sympathetic nervous system is not the one you want to trigger. Parasympathetic system is what you want, because if you think of paramedics, paramedics are there to help you. They're going to save your life. The sympathetic system is going to sympathize with you. All right. So you want the parasympathetic process to kick in. That's the one that helps you learn how to be calm. It helps you to learn how to relax, to keep things in perspective, to not get wigged out. Scott says, I've never fallen 10 stories, though I have fallen the equivalent of 3-story into an airbag. Well, what did that feel like, Scott? Even though it was an airbag, it was abrupt, right? It was abrupt. I've jumped off of some high spots and landed in water, and that was better than concrete. But I'll tell you what, it still was a little brutal. It was kind of brutal, but it wasn't concrete, right? And that's because I made sure that there was water there, just like in a trade, setting it up to where you know what the outcome will be if it goes against you, and you're okay with that. Guys, I was okay with jumping off of the 45, 50 feet into the water. I knew it was going to hurt. So why did I do it? Because a girl was watching. What can I say? My brother had already done it, and he was going, oh, dude, don't chicken out. You know, whatever the motivation was, I had to calculate that, will the consequence be survivable? Yes, it will. Will it be worth it? Yeah, it's going to hurt, but yeah, it's going to be worth it, because my brother's not going to be able to say I was a wimp, right? That's the principle. All right, solutions. Let's talk about this. So can you learn how to respond to anxiety and prevent it, and or prevent it? And the answer is yes. This is the wonderful thing. You actually can learn how to respond to it correctly, and you can learn how to prevent it. Remember, 85% of what we're worrying about never happens. That's the first thing that should comfort you a little bit. 85% doesn't happen. 13% happened, but it wasn't that bad. And I actually learned something. Something good actually came out of it. Only 3%. Guys, with 3% odds, you get out on the freeway and you drive at ridiculous speeds. And even though you have air belts and a seat bag, you could still die. People do it all the time. They manage to pull it off and die in traffic accidents every day. And yet we still go out there going 65, 75, 85 miles an hour down the freeway. We do it. Why? Because it's a calculated risk. And we have risk reward benefits. And we know that there's the outside possibility, but we've taken all of the precautionary measures we can, and we feel like it's worth taking the risk. Guys, that's how you live every day. You shouldn't trade any differently, right? You have 50-50 odds of a trade going in your favor, but you can improve that odds by making the outcome very big, very rewarding, and the cost, if it goes against you, very survivable. In fact, you can get it to the point, if you want, where you have zero risk of losing money. If you think about it, you got 50-50 odds, and you can have a near zero or even a zero risk of losing money. Now, if you want a zero risk of losing money, you're going to be in a compound trade that's going to make very little money. But if you're willing to give away most of the profit, you can buy insurance to protect a trade so that you don't have any risk, right? And if you want to have a tiny, tiny profit margin, go for it. There's a way to do it. You want a larger profit margin, the risk is commensurate. But if it's tolerable risk, if it's risk that isn't going to kill you, which you can do by putting an airbag, yeah, you know, it might hurt, but I won't die, okay? And now we change the analogy and say we're going across a rope swing, a rope bridge, and we're putting the airbag under it. And the rope bridge is pretty dicey. But if I make it across, there's a big, nice pot of money on the other side of that. If I fall off, yeah, I'm going to fall off, but I'm not going to die because I gave up some of that money. There's still a fair amount, but I gave up some of it to buy an airbag, and I put it down there just in case. And yeah, it may hurt when I hit the airbag, but I can walk away from it. And I'd try it again. I'd do it again, because if I do make it across that rope bridge, and I do sometimes, wow, that I get a nice big reward there, right? Guys, it's got to be that kind of management. And I bring this up again, spending is not losing. And that's a whole nother discussion. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I'll just remind you that in your brain, you have got a built-in response to losing. You've learned it. Now, you weren't born with it, but you've learned to avoid losing, to hate losing. Okay? We do a lot subconsciously and consciously to avoid losing. We don't like to be called a loser. We don't like somebody saying, you screwed up, man. No, I didn't. Oh, yeah, you really did. No, I didn't. Now, you know you did, but you don't want to admit it. Not in front of this jerk, right? I mean, we've got these built-in mechanisms that help us in some way, but they're kind of silly. But they're knee-jerk responses to avoid losing, especially losing money, losing face. You know, it doesn't take a child too long. About the age of 3 is when they start lying, okay? And it's just self-preservation. They become aware enough of themselves and the circumstances and consequences. Somebody said, did you drop that? Did you break that? No. And they're sitting there with it all over their hands. They're going, no. They're just trying to avoid the accountability. If you can change your mindset to what you set up in a trade as you are willing to risk, is not losing. You're risking it, but you're not losing it. If you promise somebody, if you promise them, I will give you $1 if I miss this shot. First of all, you better have the dollar. Second of all, you better not be lying. Put the dollar on the table. If you miss the shot, the dollar's gone. In fact, as soon as you put it on the table, you should consider it gone, because you may or may not make this shot. And you got to be okay with it. If you say, no, I was just kidding. Okay. So I got a funny story for you. And I do want to tell you this. There's enough time. My brother told me this story, and it's fantastic. There were 2 brothers, and the one had helped the other one out a couple of times, and the gracious brother, or the grateful brother said, hey, you're just my favorite. You're the best in the world. But if I lost my house, if I was in a position where I'd lost my house, could I come to you? Would you help me? And the gracious brother said, absolutely. If I had 2 houses, I would give you one of my houses. Really? I would. Oh, you're the best. He gives him a big hug. He comes back later and he goes, you know, if I was living in that house you gave me, and in order to make my living, I didn't have the right kind of transportation. I needed a special vehicle, like a special truck, to do my work. Would you help me out with that? And he said, you know what? If I had 2 trucks, I would give you one of my trucks. Okay? I would give you one of my trucks. I promise. Oh, you're just the best. I love you. You're so. And then he comes back and he says, now, if I was living in that house and I had that truck you gave me, and I was running out of food and I was really hungry, and I needed a chicken, I needed a chicken to feed me and to feed my family, would you help me out? And the gracious brother went, and he stroked his chin and he went, well. And the other guy said, wait a minute, what? You gave me a house, you gave me a truck, what's the deal? And he goes, yeah, but I have 2 chickens. Okay. Now, if you got that, it's funny. It's hysterical. If you've already heard it, you're just smiling, going, yeah, I already know that. If you missed it, I'm really sorry. I guess I told the joke bad. But you see, he was more than willing to say, yeah, I'd give you a house when he didn't have 2 houses, and I'd give you a truck, but he didn't have 2 trucks. But when it came down to, I give you a chicken, but I've got 2 chickens, right? Guys, you don't say to the market, you can have my $1 if this trade goes against me, and then get all upset if the trade goes against you and the market takes your $1. You didn't lose the $1. You didn't lose the $1. You've got to be serious about that. You can't say, oh, yeah, I'd give you a house. But when it comes time to, now you've got two houses. Can I have one? Well, you see, it's different. And we have got to have the mindset of having already put that money out there, and I can afford that. What it boils down to, guys, when I say spending is not losing, is that in your mind, you have got to have a different disposition to risk in the market, because you cannot lose money in the market if you trade correctly. It may cost you money, but that money that you spend, not lose, is what you are willing to spend to find out. Is this trade going to work? It looks like it. Everything looks like it. Is it going to work? It's 50-50. You know, it sure looks like it. Everything looks like it. But is it going to be work? Is it going to be worthwhile? I don't know. What's it worth? If this trade goes against you, the way you've got your stop set up, it will cost you $2,000. Yikes, $2,000? What's the upside? Well, if it goes in your favor, it could be $9,000 to $15,000, just depending on, you know, where it taps out. You go, whoa, 9 to 15 on the upside, 2,000 on the downside. Well, if I've got 2,000 that's extra, that's laying around, I may look at that and say, you know what, I think it's worth risking this too for a chance to get the 9, because all of the things point to it working. Now, it might not, and it'll cost the 2, but boy, if it does what it looks like it's going to do, now you make the trade. And it goes against you and it costs you the 2,000. Did you lose 2,000? And the answer is no, you didn't lose a dime. Yeah, but you're out 2,000. Not really, but it's gone. I know, I spent it. Well, spent, lose, the same thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. I didn't lose a dime. I spent 2,000 to find out because it looked like it. It looked like it so much that I was willing to risk 2,000 to what? To find out, not to beat the market. And if it goes in my favor and I make $9,000, $10,000, $12,000, I didn't beat anything. I just made a good investment. I made a good trade because I had a big enough upside to justify the downside, and I had the downside to spare. It was spare, and I was willing to find out. Guys, that does not trigger anxiety. Do you see? It does not trigger anxiety if it is thought out, if it is weighted properly, if you have the right risk and you've got the money, you've got the 2 chickens, and you're willing to give up one of the chickens, then it's not a risk. It's a decision to spend. It's a decision to find out. You can say risk, okay, because I don't know. Yeah, what's the risk? Okay, but I'm okay with the risk. It's not going to kill me, and I really would like to find out. It looks really promising. I'm willing to spend 2,000 to find out. Now, are you willing to spend 20,000 to find out? Are you willing to spend 200,000 to find out? I don't know that answer. You might be. I have put, well, won't go into detail, but I've put big numbers down on something because I was willing to find out, knowing that it could go the other way. But the upside better be worth it. And you better have everything lined out to where you've got everything that you can find out is found out. All of the unknowns are in the known column to the degree that you can. And then you make that trade based on the fact that I am willing to spend this much to find out. Guys, do you get it? Does that make sense? I know some of you have heard me say this 10 times, 20 times. But something like this should be something that you go, oh yeah, I got to keep that in mind. I got to keep that in mind. Guys, I don't know very many people. I have not known very many people that have this dialed into where that's the way they think all the time. They think about it sometimes and then they get caught. They get a little careless because trades go in their favor a little bit, and then something turns and they have 4 trades go against them and they think the world just fell apart. What's wrong? Everything's gone. You know, I've lost my edge. Everything's crashing in around me. I'm no good anymore. And the anxiety comes crazy. Guys, if you can have this mindset all the time, you can trade and you'll trade fine. Effectively, I call it trading neutral. Tripp says, as I say so many times, and I learned it from you, words are important. It is about cost, not loss. 2 4-letter words, cost versus loss. And Tripp is exactly right. It's what it looks like, not what I think is going to happen. 2 5-letter words. Tripp, thanks for bringing those up there. And guys, this is something that I have taught for many, many, many years. Your brain does not like a vacuum. You pull something out, it's going to pull it right back in. Unless you pull it out and stick something in that was the same size, and it's like, oh, okay, no big deal. I know that's simplistic, but there's a lot of truth to that. Guys, how many times have you said, we're going to do something different, and a week later, you're back doing it the way you were? You're just pulling something out. When you pull something out, you have to put something right back in that's of equal value in order to keep it. You've all seen the movies, right? They've got the guy's trying to steal something in a carefully controlled environment. Indiana Jones, you're going to take that golden thing or that ruby or that emerald, whatever, and they've got a sack of sand exactly the same weight, and very quickly they pull the ruby out and drop the sand in so that it doesn't trip the wire, right? I mean, it's kind of that way with your brain. You can't just say, well, we're not going to do that anymore. Yeah, you probably are, unless you put something in there. Trading neutral means you are trading where you have not invested your opinion. You've not made it about winning and losing. You have put value in the potential of the outcome, and you've weighed that against a cost, and you've adjusted it to where the cost is worth finding out, good or bad. That's a too good of an opportunity. I'm willing to spend this much to find out. Okay, that's all it really boils down to. If you can do that, you don't trigger the anxiety. You don't trigger the sympathetic nervous system. You don't trigger the fight or flight. It's not about winning or losing. It's about doing the right thing in each moment. The winning takes care of itself. Okay? That's the context. Managing risk. The only risk what you can lose without any fear, without triggering that sympathetic nervous system. You only risk in a trade that which will not trigger the anxiety response. If it's triggering anxiety at the potential of that trade going against you and costing that much, you've risked too much. You don't have enough of a ratio. You're out of control, and you will risk making bad adjustment decisions. Now, guys, that's where people get in trouble most of the time, is that they will start messing with a trade plan if it starts to go against them. Sometimes even when it goes in their favor. You got a plan all thought out. If this happens, I do this. If this happens, I do this. If this happens, I do this. Okay, it's a great plan. Put it in place. And then the market starts to turn against you, and you go, I think we better adjust the plan. I'll just leave it go. No, but so what do you hear? You hear the anxiety, you hear fear starting to build up. Oh, this is not going the way I thought it was. Maybe we ought to change the plan. And then, guys, it almost always goes off the rails, right? Almost always goes off the rails. You've got to have the risk reward set up to where it doesn't trigger the fear response. It doesn't trigger the anxiety. It doesn't trigger that sympathetic nervous system. You can only control the risk level. If this happens, then it'll cost that much. Are you okay with that? Why would you even risk $10? Well, because there's a good chance of making 400. Wow, 400 to 10? Yeah, that is a good risk. Why do you think it's going to go this way and make 400? Well, because the stock is in this position, and you go down your indicators, you go down your patterns, whatever it is that leads you to believe that there's a good chance that this is going to move this far and you could make $400, and it's only going to cost you $10 to give it a shot. Well, heck yeah, sounds good. But if it goes against you and you run around kicking bricks and yelling and cursing at people because you lost $10, guys, it just tells you a story right there. You should have never made that trade in the first place. Never made that trade in the first place. Guys, you plan the best and you plan the worst outcomes, and you accept it. and you honestly say, I'm okay if this thing goes south on me. If this goes the wrong direction, I'm okay with that. Okay? You have to have that process. Now, the third thing is breathe. And this means literally, guys, breathing can actually control anxiety. So I said, can we do things to prevent it? Yes, we just talked about them. Can we do things to manage the anxiety if it starts to come up anyway? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. Okay. The special forces, the Navy SEALs, the Delta Force, anything that has an elite status where there is literal risk, where there is something seriously at risk if you screw up. One of the things that's always taught is breathing techniques. Why? Because under an anxiety or a panic attack, and you may not think that this can actually work, but this is proved. You cannot panic if you are forcing yourself to breathe a certain way. So they train under pressure, under fire. They pound on them. They try to distract them. If you can hold a certain breathing pattern, you can restrict that sympathetic nervous system. You can force the parasympathetic nervous system in, and you can force calmness. You can force calculated, smooth, effective responses in the face of total chaos. All right. What comes to mind? But you gotta do that. And it's sometimes hard. Do you remember the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie? I don't remember the name of the gal. Some of you will remember her name. But he was sitting there and he was shooting the arrow, and he had shot a bullseye, and he had split an arrow, and he had showed his great prowess with the bow. And she's standing, Maid Mariam is standing next to him, and he draws that back, and he's so focused, and she comes up, and just as he releases it, she blows in his ear, and the arrow goes off and almost kills somebody. Okay, so you have to focus, and you be careful about having the startle reflex break you out of that state of mind, because then the anxiety will kick in, because it wants to. It's right there. You're holding it at bay just by breathing. Now, I didn't give you the magic formula, because as I have studied this, there are 2 or 3 different versions of that both seem like they work. I've tried them and they work. But basically, it is a slow inhale. You hold it, and then you even slower exhale, and you hold. Then you inhale slowly, you hold it, you exhale even slower, like a couple of them are if you breathe in for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 8 seconds, and then you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you breathe in again. Guys, if you can force yourself to learn how to do that, you could, that's what these special forces do when bullets are flying around their head or the bombs are going off, and they have to try to stay focused. They can do it. It's amazing that they can do that, but it takes practice, and you have to have that process nailed down to where you use it. Now, do you need to do that in training? Maybe not, but there are certain things that you need to do. I teach that you get up out of your chair and you break your state of mind. If you look down and you see your arms are crossed or folded, you unfold them, you stand up, you tip your head back, you take a deep breath, you close your eyes, and then you open them up, and then you breathe. Guys, you can break yourself out of an anxiety attack, or if you are feeling that, there's methods to become a third person. You act as if you're the person who's standing behind you, advising you. All these things work. What I'm saying is there are tricks. There are things that you can do, okay, to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, to tamp down, press down the sympathetic nervous system. And breathing is one of the key elements of that. It interrupts or it feeds. You see, the other part of breathing is the rapid, shallow chest breathing, which makes it even worse, because then your brain starts to realize we're not getting enough oxygen fast enough, so you panic, which means you breathe even faster and shallower, And then people do go into total panic attacks where they're incapacitated. They literally are incapacitated. And that happens in military. You know, people just, they freak out and they freeze. D-Day on the beaches of Normandy. You had so many of the soldiers that a month earlier were pitching hay in the farm field, and they were drafted in this final big response. They had a crash course for a couple of weeks, and then they were on an airplane or they were on a ship, and now they're in a landing barge. And as they approach the water, they can hear the bullets pinging off the metal landing barge that they're in. And these guys are starting to freak out. And they drop the door down. As they drop the door down, it's like the opening scene of the Gladiator movie, when the first time he went out into the arena, they open the door and the first guy walking through the door gets killed. He gets torn apart because somebody's waiting behind the door to hit him. When they dropped those doors down at Normandy, bullets came in, and people, they're standing there. Suddenly, you know, the guy next to you, his head blows open, you know, and they fall down. And a lot of these guys, they got in the water, they crawled onto the beach, and they just laid there. They laid there. I kid you not. They laid there with their face down, clutching their rifle. Some of them had dropped their rifle, and they were just probably wetting themselves if they hadn't done it already, and they couldn't move. They literally couldn't move. But some of the soldiers that had had some experience, some of the sergeants in particular, the stories are told, as they would be coming up the beach and they'd see one of these guys and they'd see he's not dead, you know, he's alive, he's sitting there just shaking. They would scream in their ear, slap them on the side of the head, pound on their helmet, grab them by the back and scream at them. And as the guy, you see, they broke the state, and he starts to get up to his knees, and then he starts to run. Pretty soon he's running like crazy, and they jump in the foxhole in the dugout, breathing hard, but alive. Well, thank goodness that sergeant came up and was so mean to them, right? Pounded them on the head, called them names, screamed in their ear, grabbed them, shook them, and drugged them. What a mean sergeant. But now the soldier's back and he's ready to fight, you know. But that sympathetic nervous system can just, it can disable you. And when you're sitting alone in front of the computer, guys, and you find yourself frozen and waiting for that bell to go down, and then you have that, as Brenda said, that huge relief when it's over, that means you were totally consumed in a loop, and that loop ran until it was over. And that's just the way it works, guys. We have loops built into our head of how we handle panic, how we handle fear, and once you start those loops, they will run until they are finished, unless they're interrupted. Now, how are you going to interrupt a loop when you're in the middle of it? You're not. If you're well into it, guys, it's too late. You just have to write it out, and you will sit there and feel all these horrible feelings until it's over, and then you'll get this huge sense of relief, because at least it's over and you're still alive. Yeah, it was horrible, but I'm alive and it's over. And that felt so good to have it over. Why? Because you were killing yourself with emotions and cortisol and all these horrible things while it was going through something you didn't think you had any control over. That's why sometimes having a trading partner, that's why having a trading team can be so helpful, because when somebody starts to go into that, somebody can slap them on the side of the head gently, right? And they can lovingly scream in their ear and call them names and grab them and lift them out of their chair and break them out of that state, figuratively, right? But those things can help. If you're by yourself, guys, you have to be preemptive. You have to try to learn some of these things so that when you start to fear it, you jump up before you start running the loop, before it gets out of control. You get out of your chair, you start talking to yourself as if you were your trading coach, or you go outside and you take a walk, or you go get something to eat, you break your state, you do something so that that loop doesn't start to run. Guys, those loops in our head are very powerful. Once you start to run, unless somebody interrupts it, you probably can't. Most people can't. You'll just run the... So the last story, Marty Weinstein. Marty Weinstein was one of the prolific traders many years ago on Wall Street, made millions. And in that day, you know, now if you don't make hundreds of millions, you're not a big deal. But back then he was a big deal. And one time he was a commodities trader. He got into a trade and it went against him, and he lost a bundle. He had already told his friends that he was going to make so much money on this set of trades that he was building a new house out in wherever, Long Island, wherever it was. He was going to build out on the beach or out on the coast. And his friends already knew, you know, because he'd been bragging about this trade. He'd been talking about it for a couple of days. the trade went against him and he froze. And he literally froze, and he watched $600,000 auger into the ground. And after it's over, some of his friends said, man, what was wrong? How'd you let that happen? Dude, how could that? You're Marty Weinstein. You lost 600 grand. Why didn't you do something when that thing was going in the toilet? And his comment, which he was humble enough to put in writing, he said, I couldn't. I couldn't. I felt like I was watching myself laying in a ditch, bleeding to death. And I couldn't do anything. I was frozen. Guys, he was running a loop. You, every one of you, have got that same loop in your head. We all do. And if it starts to run and it gets a start, you can't stop it. You'll just wake up when it's done and try to say, next time I won't do that. Yeah, you probably will. You let it go that far, you will. Or you say, I'm not going to do this ever again, and you walk away. Depends on how painful it was. But guys, your chances are only good if you learn how to prevent it, or you learn how to manage it before it gets out of control. And I've given you some ideas of how to prevent it. And I've given you some ideas how to manage it. There's more. There's a lot more detail. But I want you to know that it's there. It can be done. And I've given you just a couple of examples. But there is things you can do to control that parasympathetic and that sympathetic contest. And if you don't, it's just a matter of time before you pay a huge price. A huge price. I hope this was helpful to you today. I just looked at my clock and we're spot on. So somebody says, I breathe like that when I do yoga, like doing yoga. It works for, yes, absolutely. That's exactly right. Trip, the brain is a powerful tool and it can be manipulated for good or for bad. That's exactly right. Guys, I hope you learned something today. You know, there's a lot of techniques and strategies and whatnot, but none of the strategies, none of the methods, none of everything you get from all the good coaching is going to help you if you periodically succumb to this trigger mechanism that's built into your psyche. It's built into your subconscious. You practice it your whole life. And once you let that loop start to run, you can't stop it. It can be interrupted. So maybe you provide a mechanism to interrupt it, another person. That's another great technique. But you either have to learn to prevent that, respect it first, prevent it, and or manage it, because it is powerful. It will take over and it will run you through the ringer if you don't. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, everybody. Happy trading to you as well. God bless. Bye-bye.